Hello, and welcome back to Curly's Creeping Corner. Today's story is called The Boy and the Stone Garden. It's going to be a bit of a long one. I hope you enjoy it. As usual, I suggest you listen to this in the quiet and dark of your room. And should you need to keep the light on for some unexpected room guests, please do so. You don't want to appear rude. Let's begin. At a young age, Asher knew the importance of items with sentimental value. During the summers, he would stay at his grandfather's house up in the mountains. That house itself was very old and very haunted, his grandfather would joke. But during all his summers of visiting, Asher could not remember any incidents that would lead him to qualify the house itself as haunted. And perhaps it was due to the fact that he was only 6 and his memory was barely starting to retain itself. But that didn't mean the house didn't leave him feeling uncertain, especially as they drove up the path to the old rusted gates. Driven by his young curiosity, Asher poked his head out the window of the back seat of his parents' Cadillac, taking in the scenery. Asher always liked to find the statues hidden all over the property, and it always started with the 2 lions at the front gates. Those were the easiest to spot. The further you drove up the property, though, the harder the stone statues became to find. And every time Asher spotted a new one in the woods around him, hiding in places he thought he'd checked before. And with every year, it seemed as though there were many new ones to find, despite the fact that they often looked old and cracked, with dirt that had gotten there many years ago. His parents brought him to the front door of the tall house. As they waited for his grandfather to open the door, Asher looked up to the roof, counting the gargoyles. 5 of them. There were 5 gargoyles staring down at him. He could have sworn there were only 4 last year. He'd counted them each time he'd walked back into the house. He was almost certain there had been an even amount of them. One of the stone faces looked down at him with an anger that Asher had never seen before. The gargoyle looked alive and furious as it continued to stare him down. The morning fog wrapped around the house, making the beast appear as though he was breathing. The fog wrapping around his face and into its nostrils. In fact, the fog bent in that same way under the gargoyles' faces, making them all appear alive and fearsome. The front door clicked, and Asher pulled his luggage quickly inside. His parents wished him goodbye, despite his pleas to return home with them. For once, he felt truly terrified of his grandfather's house. His grandfather reassured him that there was nothing to fear in that house, though. But Asher worried more for what awaited him outside. Due to the rain on the first few nights of his stay, Asher remained inside, exploring the old rooms while his grandfather worked in his study. It was the only room he was never allowed to enter. But after a week of being kept inside, Asher's curiosity could hold no longer. He wanted to know what kept his grandfather so busy during the days. He waited outside his grandfather's study in hopes of catching him between meals. But eventually he grew bored, and as he made himself comfortable in one of the chairs in the hall, his eyes began to drift as he scanned through the photos on the wall, each frame filled with one unfamiliar face after the next, until eventually he dozed off. He awoke to the sound of whispers in the distance. Asher looked down the hall to his grandfather's study. The door was open. Asher looked around to see if any of the household workers were around to catch him, but he was completely alone in the hall. Asher quietly sneaked up to the door. The light in the study was still on, but his grandfather did not appear to be in sight. He could have sworn this was the direction that he had heard the voices coming from, but all he could see was a silhouette of something sitting on the working table. Asher scanned the hall once more before tiptoeing into the study. As he walked closer to the desk, he could see that the object was made of stone. Asher peered over the large desk in hope of getting a good look at it. Another gargoyle. But this one looked even more beastly than the ones outside. Its teeth appeared sharper and its eyes more menacing as it flared down at the small child in front of him. Asher started to hear what sounded like whispers and quickly shut his eyes to the door to see if he had been caught. But no one was there. And the harder Asher listened, the more the muffled whisper sounded as though it was coming from inside the belly of the beast in front of him. But it was only stone, Asher thought. It couldn't be possible. And yet it sounded as though it was a deep, low rumble coming from the monster's stomach. Asher pulled up a chair from the table and pushed it up against the stone statue. Climbing up, he realized he had never been this close to one of the statues before. And suddenly it dawned on him just how small he was in comparison to the looming object in front of him. "Asher!" he heard his grandfather yell from the study door. "What are you doing in here?" Asher's grandfather quickly pulled him off the chair and walked him out of the study, calling for one of the housemaids. "You shouldn't be in here," his grandfather yelled. "I've told you many times never to come in here. What were you thinking? The statue could have crushed you." "I thought I heard voices," Asher whispered, looking down at his feet. "You thought you heard voices? Where?" his grandfather asked. "From inside the stone." Asher started looking up at his grandfather, whose face had now gone white. One of the housemaids came running, pulling Asher away and apologizing for not having kept a better eye on the child. But Asher's grandfather didn't respond. He only continued to stare at Asher with a blank expression on his face. The housemaid walked Asher to the front door and coaxed him into a raincoat and boots. "A young boy like you should be out playing in the mud, not stuffed in here in these old rooms," she stated as she walked him out the door. "There's an old playground up the hill if you follow up the path to the right. You can't miss it." She closed the door behind Asher with a loud thump. This was the first time he had been outside since arriving. The rain had finally stopped and the fog had finally lifted. Asher poked his head from under the front covering and looked up at the gargoyles in front of the house. They all glared down at him, their shadows stretching out over the ground in front of him. A crow gawked from over the largest gargoyle's shoulder, but the sound startled Asher enough that he ran in the direction of the playground and didn't stop till he reached it. Once the gargoyle seemed far enough away, Asher's fears settled a bit, and he felt that childlike curiosity peak in him again as he walked around the old playset. If it wasn't for the creepy gargoyles, Asher felt, he wouldn't find the house so scary. He sat on one of the swings and began to push himself, higher and higher, till all of his childish fears drifted away. He brought himself slowly back down to a stop and regained himself from the swing's motions, looking around the playground for what to do next. Only in his swinging he hadn't realized that the thick fog he remembered seeing the first day had arrived once more and was now beginning to cover the playground. Asher started to feel uneasy as he put his feet back on the ground and stood up. There, in front of the playground, only a few feet away from him, stood a frog statue. He hadn't recalled seeing the statue when he had first arrived on the playground, but it was certainly there now. This statue looked much less threatening than the gargoyles that sat over the house. Asher made his way towards it, drawn by his curiosity. With each step closer, he began to make out muffled whispers again, like he had heard in the study inside. Only these whispers sounded less threatening. The fog around Asher and the frog began to spread clearing some of the view of the field around them. And as he looked around, Asher realized he was surrounded by many more statues than just that of the frog, and they were all whispering. Asher tried to listen to what they were saying, but they all sounded muffled, and with the numerous voices, Asher found it impossible to focus on just one. The sound of all the statues yelling at him started to worry. Asher as he started to back away from them and head back to the house. Suddenly, rain broke from the sky and the whisper stopped. Asher turned around as the sound of the water hitting the stone statues filled the air around him. The rain washed away the dirt from their surfaces, and they appeared almost pleased by it. But they were statues, Asher thought. They shouldn't be able to even whisper. And so he ran back to the house anyway. He thought about telling his grandpa of his encounters with the statues, but he remembered the long, blank stare he had received earlier, and instead decided to ask the housemaid, Sophie, if she knew about the statues as she tucked him into bed. She didn't know much about them, only that there were a lot of them and that they had been there for as long as she could remember. Then Asher asked about the whispering. Sophie replied, "Often the wind can make us think we are hearing voices when there are none there. And when we are young, we often make friends out of this thin air. Imaginary friends," she called them. "But we needn't worry about them," she stated, "as they are meant to offer friendship, not harm." And with that, she tucked him in. Asher drifted off as he thought of the frog statue in the field. Perhaps Sophie was right. Perhaps it was a friend. Every day after, when it wasn't raining, Asher ran away from the house, towards the old playground with an old watering can he found in one of the gardens. He thought of how peaceful the statues looked as the rain washed away the dirt from them, and he would do the same to keep those whispers quiet. Asher went out every day with his watering can and a brush to clean the statues hiding around the estate, always making sure to take extra time with his very best friend, the frog. The only statues that still gave him grief were the ugly gargoyles still perched on the roof of the house. Asher wondered if those same gargoyles were meant to be his friends, as he couldn't hear any faint whispers from them. He decided it was probably for the best that they were too high up for him to hear, as he wasn't sure he wanted them to be his friends. The long and rainy summer eventually came to an end, and it was time for his parents to retrieve him. Asher made one last trip to the old playground to wish his frog friend goodbye, and to give him one more cleaning before his return next year. But to Asher's surprise, the frog statue was gone. He walked around the premises looking for the statue with no luck. Eventually, Asher made his way back to the house, prepared to ask his grandfather of the whereabouts of that statue. Upon returning, though, he saw some of the other house staff outside struggling about on the roof, and as Asher got closer, he could see that they were placing another statue on the roof. The gargoyle from the study. The one he had heard the first whispers of. As they struggled to fit him on the perch off the roof, Asher watched as a crow came to sit on one of the gargoyle's heads, picking away at it as it had all summer. The crow continued to pick away on the same gargoyle that had initially startled Asher. The thought of the gargoyle being destroyed by one pesky crow made him smile as he saw some of the statue crumble to the ground in front of him. Asher walked towards it, thinking stone shouldn't crumble so easily. Should it? He knelt down to pick up some of the flakes of what he had thought was stone. The pieces in his hand felt like sand. But what caught his eye more was the odd stain on one of the chips. It was red and dried. he had never seen any sand or gravel that was red like brick before. Asher's parents pulled up the driveway to collect their son as they drove away from the house. Asher's parents pulled up the driveway to collect their son, and as they drove away from the house, Asher couldn't help but think of the red dried stain. What had become of his friend? In fact, as Asher looked around for the other statues, he noticed that many of them were missing, including the 2 lions at the gates. Asher didn't return to the house the following summer, or any summer after. But he still liked to water the stone statues in his own garden at home, the ones that had seemingly began to appear overnight. So that was the story. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it wasn't too spooky, but I hope it was a little bit spooky. I sort of got the idea from watching my baby nephew. We usually when I babysit him, we'll be in our backyard a lot, and one of his favorite things to do is to like water our statues in the back. Like, you know how we have these little like kid statues. We have like this baby Buddha. We have like a couple of animal statues and whatnot. And he likes to, you know, pretend he's cleaning them because he's 3, and he's like, these are so, I gotta wash them because they're alive. So in hindsight, most people probably are just like, oh, that's cute. But sometimes I'm like, it's okay, a little creepy that he kind of talks to them. Not that it's weird. Like, kids have imaginary friends. I know for a fact I did. I used to pretend that my freaking playground in my backyard was a boat. It was a pirate's boat. And I would sail with Captain Hook and all of the other Teletubbies, and my mom likes to remind me that that's something that I did. But, like, it's a little spooky sometimes. Like, if you think about it for too long, you're like, like, is he making this up? Is he responding to something that I didn't hear? So yeah, I got the idea from that, and so I kind of ran with it. And since it was more like a little kid spooky story, I was like, maybe I won't make this one like too spooky, but like, I don't know. End of the day, I feel like it'd be kind of a fun project. Maybe next year. I don't know if necessarily this year, but definitely next year, or even going forward. I could like storyboard these out with like drawings and like cute little things, and who knows, maybe one day animate them. Or this could, like, it could be something I pitch as, like, a scary story, thing. I don't know. I'm always, like, every time I start something, I'm always like, big dreams. But, we'll see. I don't have too many new, news updates, life updates or anything. Just know the film is coming along. I'm in this weird part of the last and final haul where I really, you know, it's just a lot of files to sort through. A lot of things that you thought you had already figured out, suddenly crap shooting. But it'll get done. I feel like the last couple of weeks have gotten really hectic and filled up with stuff and not enough time for me to actually work on my film. Sometimes it feels like I sit down for like 5 minutes and that's all I get to see or work on my film for the day. Other times it feels like I get lost for like 20 minutes and then, you know, other times I get to put in like 3 hours straight. So it's kind of just, I play it by ear. I think because of that I've been really hesitant to give a date. I still don't have one yet. Sorry, just because I know that this week is going to be kind of crazy. And yeah. But I'm hoping as this next week comes up, that'll be the last remaining bit of time I need to kind of wrap it up. Because the fact that it isn't done yet has really been eating away at my mental health. Because I want to see it done. Because I've just been watching the progress and progress and progress, and while, the progress is really good to keep me motivated, I'm definitely somebody that likes to see a result in order to be happy. So the fact that it's just not done yet has really been grinding. But I'm working through it. The film's almost done. That's all. That's the only thing that's keeping me going. It's almost there. We're on that last little. So I'm just fighting through this little wave, this little cloud in my brain, to sort it out. Other than that, the film will be up shortly. Not shortly. Soon. Soonly. I don't know how to say what I need to say. The point is, the film is almost done. And this is this episode. If you do like Curly's Creeping Corner so far, and you want to support even in just the smallest way, I put my Redbubble link down in the description below. And what you have there are some lovely buttons. You can buy a button, you can buy a sticker. There's a sticker of the design that I was talking about last week. There are face masks. Right now, any support is really what people can give. Right? So, I get it. It's been a long couple of months. And it's going to be a long couple of more months up ahead. But hopefully these help you to forget about all of what is happening in the world for even at least 5 minutes. That's all I want, is to have a space where there is enough creativity and imagination and darkness that people can get away from all of that in their own lives for just a few moments. So if that's all I can do, then that's all I can do. If you like this story, remember to give it a like. If you didn't like it, you can also do the thumbs down. That is a-okay. Do what you need to do. It's tough times. Other than that, thank you guys for listening. Stay spooky, my friends.